Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Unstoppable Mindset. Glad you're with us wherever you happen to be today. We get to interview Keith Stump. Keith is a person I met through a colleague at Accessiby, our nonprofit manager, Sheldon Lewis. Sheldon, who we also interviewed here on Unstoppable Mindset. Keith has been involved in the disabilities world for over 20 years, and specifically mostly involved in developmental disabilities and so on. And we'll get to all that because I'm anxious to hear what he's doing and how he got there and all the things that he's accomplished. And I'm sure that it will be inspiring to all of us. But Keith, welcome to Unstoppable Mindset.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.
So tell us a little bit about you, kind of how you got started and all the early stuff.
Sure. Well, again, thank you for asking and thank you for the opportunity. So I knew right out of college, quite honestly, that I wanted to be involved in the nonprofit world. Initially, that started on the global front. My background really up until fairly recently has been working in countries all over the world on behalf of refugees, immigrants, and many families that had children or caregivers, parents that had developmental disabilities. And so it has been very exciting to see that also translate here now that I'm working in the U.S. Again, I've always just had a passion for serving people and happy to continue doing that.
So here you are now in the Central Valley in California, and that'll be an interesting story to hear how you got there. But how did you start out in terms of dealing with the global world and how you got involved in serving at that level? And then how did that translate into coming kind of more into a little bit more localized environment?
Sure. So it all started with an internship in Cambodia. And I will say that at that point, really did not want to go to Asia. I had nothing against Asia, of course, but I thought that I would be working in a number of other countries, continents, and I had the opportunity to go. I just decided, let's do this. Let's see where it goes and what I can learn. And that really opened my eyes, I will say, first and foremost, to the needs that were greater than just those that I was seeing here in the U.S. And certainly there are needs here as well. But when I started to see, and at that time in Cambodia, a lot of it had to do with human trafficking. There was a lot of trafficking happening with young girls, even young boys. And I noticed as I began to learn more and more that often children were put into trafficking situations because obviously their families could not support them or could not support the family unit as a whole. And so they felt they had no choice but to put a child into trafficking, which was truly tragic. The thing that I learned through that is that, or really developed a passion through that for serving families. I learned that if we can serve the family unit as a whole, we'll be able to keep children out of these really tragic situations. If we can provide them a means to support themselves and certainly children to be educated, we're basically on the way to fighting against human trafficking. And also what happened with that is I noticed that a lot of the families that were most desperate were families that had children with disabilities, developmental disabilities, physical disabilities. And that really started, I guess I should say, my road in terms of focusing specifically on family preservation and working with families that had children with special needs.
So who did you do this internship with? How did that come about?
That was during my undergrad, and that was with Bethany Global, which is out of Minneapolis. So I did the internship. I was in Cambodia for about a year. I went with a couple other students, which was mostly a lot of fun. Once in a while, I had some drama, but it was a good time. And the great thing about it is I also met my wife during this internship. We lived in the same apartment complex. And so I worked with her aunt at a local orphanage. Again, at that time, it was on behalf of some trafficking victims. And so one night, her aunt invited me over for dinner, and we got to know each other. And 15 years later, we're still married. We've been together for 17 years. So the global experience, for lack of a better word, has not only become something that I'm personally very invested, or I should say professionally very invested in, but personally, we get to go back to Cambodia a lot and visit her family, and it's been good. I have a real passion for serving people around the world, and again, I'm very grateful that I've been able to do that locally here as well.
It's interesting that you say that a lot of the families that seem to be the most desperate are families that have persons with disabilities in them. Was that desperation also in part because of trafficking or what?
It was because they didn't, often they didn't know what to do with those children. I know that sounds really awful, but that's the reality. And, Cambodia was just sort of the tip of the iceberg as I finished school and really stepped into global work here in the U.S. initially. After the internship, I worked on behalf of refugees and undocumented immigrants, but that took me all over as well. And then eventually I moved into working with a family preservation program, spent a lot of time in Haiti and Ethiopia specifically, as well as Cambodia, of course. And at that point, I really focused specifically on, again, families that had children with special needs. And they just didn't have the resources. There were still a lot of taboos around folks that had disabilities, specifically in Ethiopia. I'll be honest with you, a lot of the taboos rose around a person's religious beliefs. They felt that if, not everyone certainly, but many people feel that if there is a disability in the family, especially with a child, the parents probably did something wrong. And so fighting against those stigmas, again, in any country, it can always be a challenge. And what happens with that then is if the family feels that they did something wrong, they are unfortunately sometimes very quick to push that child into a very desperate situation, right? So if the child can be trafficked, they may do that simply, again, to earn a little bit of extra money, which is, of course, truly tragic. I always remind folks that it's easy to beat these parents up, but then when you see what they're dealing with, and often many of them are in extreme poverty and have 7 or 8 other kids, as tragic as it is, you can start to see how that really desperate road is taken.
And unfortunately, the child with the disability is I was going to say the loser, but everyone loses in that kind of situation because we don't realize the gifts that maybe that child with a disability really brings to the world or could bring to the world if given the opportunity.
Absolutely. Yes.
And so then we have that challenge. And it happens worldwide. It happens all over. And it happens in this country sometimes in a more subtle way, but it happens in this country as well, that kids with disabilities, kids who are different, are just not treated the same. They're not given the same opportunities. And there's a lot of disservice that somehow we need to address as well.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So you came back from that, and then what?
So keep in mind that was over the period of about 15 years, and so we eventually landed here in the Central Valley, where I am now in Visalia, California. My wife also has family here, and so I have young children. And we decided it's time to settle down. We were both traveling a lot, specifically me, and I have had the opportunity now to be with ABLE Inc. ABLE is an organization that works specifically here in Tulare County in Visalia on behalf of individuals who have developmental disabilities specifically. And so we teach life skills, independent living, money management, and then we also do job training and job placement. And so it has been really amazing to be able to do this close to home. As much as I love global work, I was certainly at a place in my life where my kids needed to see me more. I wanted to see them more. And being able to do essentially the same work, like you said, some of the challenges are different, but the challenges are still very real. There's plenty of taboos here to deal with as well. But being able to do it locally and in my own community, my wife and I recently just bought a house, and we're really plugged in here and looking to get more plugged in. That has been exciting because I've actually never had that opportunity. As much as I worked globally or on behalf of a state or nationally on some level, I was always in a different place, right? So I would go in, I would see the same people for a couple of weeks, and then I would have to fly out. And now that I get to do this in my community and spend time with amazing individuals on a daily basis, it's been a lot of fun. It's been very exciting as well.
How long has ABLE been around as an organization?
ABLE has been around since '62. And so we are getting ready this year, in fact, to celebrate our 60th
anniversary. And what does ABLE stand for?
Well, quite honestly, ABLE stands for, and I'm going to explain it this way because we recently rebranded. And one of the coolest things with the rebrand is we use the word, we used to be ABLE Industries Incorporated. Now we just go by ABLE. And during the rebrand process, we ended up coming up with a new logo and all of that. But the word ABLE really came to the forefront. And during that process, our designer came up with ABLE period. They put a period at the word after the word ABLE. And that was something that our board really grasped onto, was this idea of we are able period. We are able. There's finality there. Enough said. We are able to be part of the community just like everybody else. And in many cases, contribute sometimes more than everybody else. So It simply means able. It simply means that we are about being in the community and we are here to be recognized, and we are able just like everybody else.
So it's not an acronym; it is ABLE.
Yeah,
which is perfect. Which is as good as it gets, right?
Yes.
So, what exactly does ABLE do?
There's essentially 3 programs that we have right now, and we essentially offer these programs to folks wherever they may be. So the first step in our program is, again, life skills, independent living skills, money management, how to cook. That's more of a classroom setting. So that would be our first step. The second step is actual job training. And I know that many organizations like ABLE, sort of our industry as a whole, has a reputation for sheltered workshops. ABLE does not have a sheltered workshop. When I say job training, we don't have people in a shop that are assembling pieces for production and kind of doing the same thing all day. We're actually out in the community. So we are very integrated. We have big contracts with our city parks, with Best Buy, a huge distribution center. We do a lot with Kraft. We've got a lot of local businesses and nonprofits that we partner with. And they give us opportunity to do on-the-site job training, paid training. And then once a individual is ready, once they've gone through that program, and our goal is to help them learn a job for about 2 years. And it's, as you know, it's not just about learning the job. Some individuals learn that job very quickly. I mean, much quicker than certainly I could if I was in their shoes. But there's some additional social skills that really need to be learned. Soft skills sometimes are the biggest challenge. So once someone completes the job training, they are eventually placed in an actual job. So competitive integrated employment. We do have a lot of acronyms. CIE is where essentially somebody finishes the program, they're placed in a full-time job, and we continue to provide case management. We provide additional insight. Sometimes we have found, and I'm sure you know this, but our community loves hiring our people, but they're sometimes a little bit scared to do it, and that's okay. They're sometimes a little bit worried about how to manage somebody that may have a bad day, that doesn't have all the soft skills. We've worked to train them in that, but we all have off days. And so the case manager really is a mediator between the individual that is with us and the employer. And so we have very long-standing relationships with employers in our community. A&W is a great example. There's a gentleman here that owns 4 different franchises, and he has employed our folks for over 15 years now. One of our staff actually, or one of our folks actually stayed with him for 10 years. And so everybody loved her. Everybody, would show up at A&W and they absolutely love what we do, because as you know, folks in many cases that have what we call developmental disabilities are some of the nicest people you're ever going to meet. Mm-hmm. And so once they're plugged into a job, they're also very committed to it. So retention is good as well. So we have a lot to give back to our community. And that has been key as well, as a nonprofit, being able to say, we're not just asking. It's very easy to always want to be on the receiving end of things, but to say, actually, we have something to give back. And by the way, if you are a business who wants to employ our folks, you're going to learn far more from them than you will teach. And I feel that way personally as well.
And the people who get hired get the same wages as everyone else. They get a competitive wage and so on.
Of course, yes.
Yeah. And I ask that because you mentioned sheltered workshops, and I don't know whether everyone in our listening audience is familiar with what sheltered workshops were and are and so on. Can you maybe describe that a little bit?
Yeah, and Enable did have a sheltered workshop. Pretty much every organization in this industry, I think, at one point they were very common, especially back in the '60s when Able started. There was unfortunately a lot of taboo around stigma around people that had developmental disabilities, and there was this idea that these folks are not going to find jobs in the real world, for lack of a better word. They're going to struggle to be integrated. And so let's create a safe space for them where they can work and often be paid, yes, less than minimum wage. They're paid by piece rate, or that's traditionally what happened, where they can work and be paid based on what they're producing. But unfortunately, many of those places ended up being, it wasn't intentional in many cases. I really think that people started it with the right intentions. It was a very different time. And again, Able had a sheltered workshop as well. And I respect what had happened there. I had seen it. Part of what I did recently was, what our team did recently was to move on beyond that. So I think intentions were right. I certainly feel that way with Able, but unfortunately, in some cases, there was abuse. And you had folks that were essentially doing the same thing every day. And they were being paid less than minimum wage. They were being paid based on what they were being paid piece rate, which basically means they were being paid based on their productivity, or what the organization or the state deemed productivity. The crazy thing about that is, and recently Trevor Noah actually did a story on this when sheltered workshops were really brought to light in the last year and the laws have changed. But none of us are 100% productive, right? It's not reasonable to expect that every single day we go to work, we're going to be able to give 100%. Some days we may get 50, 60, some days 120. But it really was very unfair to the individuals who worked in those sheltered workshops, because, as you can imagine, they're being held to a standard that really not everyone else is. And it's not fair to look at a human being just based on what we consider productivity. And so I am very glad that the industry as a whole has moved beyond that. And although there's some challenges with that, I have, certainly, and Able has as well, readily embraced those challenges. So it's fairly recent. And again, it's exciting to see folks move beyond that, because I'll be transparent. I feel personally, I'm newer to Able, but I feel personally that it should have happened quite a while ago, and that the industry as a whole should have moved beyond that a long time ago. And maybe it shouldn't have been. Again, different time, different place. I'm not going to comment on how it worked in the past, but certainly it's one of those deals. Now that we know better, we can do better.
Right. Well, of course, part of the issue with sheltered workshops, and I'm familiar with them as well from the blindness standpoint, because sometimes departments of rehabilitation and other forces would shunt blind people into sheltered workshops and other people with other so-called disabilities, because the feeling was that we could not be productive. And the whole point of the workshop is that it began with the Javits-Wagner-O'Day Act back in 1938, when the whole concept of workers' rights and employment and work weeks and so on, and minimum wage and so on, were all created. And the idea was that the workshop was supposed to be a training place where people who might not have the same opportunities as others, and I think it was intended to be something with the right attitude and the right intentions, but the intent was that the workshops would be a place where people could go to get trained, and then they would go out into the workplace. But unfortunately, a number of the workshop people decided to take it further, and there was also a minimum wage. As I recall, if you were put into a workshop initially, you would get 3/4 of the wage that others would get in competitive employment. And the whole idea was it was a training facility.
Yeah.
But then workshop people evolved it to lower the minimum wage to the point where eventually it got to be that there was no minimum, and people were being paid, blind people, for example, 22 cents an hour to make brooms. And as you pointed out, there was the whole issue of the productivity, the piece productivity rate. And they had some very bad standards for how they determined how competitive a person could be So it was a very unfortunate thing, and it is something where most of the country is recognizing the value that Able did of getting away from the workshop and going out into the regular community, because people can be competitively employed.
Mm-hmm. And it's great for the community. I mean, again, I will tell you that I'm just going to say it, but this idea and this stigma that was there in the past, that we have to keep people safe, that we almost have to keep them locked away from the general population, is truly tragic, because now that we have been out and about for 20 years now, but now that we also have the side of our employment training where we're out in the community and integrated, it is super exciting to see and to be part of something where folks could say, hey, I recognize you from when you were in the parks, or you were at Best Buy, or what have you. And again, our community really loves Able and loves the people that we serve. So it truly would be tragic to keep them in a warehouse all day. I don't know how else to say that, not only for their own sake, but because they have so much to give back.
Well, and I think in general, people would find that these people are brighter than you think, and they know.
Oh, absolutely.
They know when they're being shunted away.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was on the board of the Fort Worth Lighthouse for the Blind for 9 years and just rotated off earlier this year. But the lighthouse for a while had a sheltered shop.
Okay.
And not while I was on the board, that had long gone away. I think back in 2004 was when the workshop was eliminated, because they discovered, rightly so, that in reality, people can work competitively. It's all about setting the stage. It's all about proper training. And I know of other agencies and so on that have gone the same way, because the reality is everyone has gifts, and what we need to do is to match the gifts to the job.
Yes, absolutely. And there are many things that I see our folks do, and this is true for staff. This is true for trainees. I mean, we hire our trainees as well, and there are things that they're much better at than I am. So we learn together. Everybody has different skills.
Now, your job at Able is?
I'm the executive director.
So. And so it's lonely being at the top, isn't it?
It can be. Yeah, it can be. We have a phenomenal management team, but we are going through a lot of changes in organization. Not only is our industry changing, which for me is exciting, because I'm not necessarily, the domestic industry is very different than the global. I have to be careful with that word industry, but the service that we provide is very different here than what I was able to do globally. So it's very exciting to have more resources. On the flip side, there's far more red tape. So that has been interesting. It's been a learning experience, but it's been very good. And again, our management team is very good. Very, very grateful for each of them. And we're in the process of moving as well. We rebranded a year ago. So Able is looking quite different, and our programs have changed a lot. And we have the move. We have a new building just in the last year. So.
Well, tell us about the move. That's an interesting thing. You'd mentioned it before. So why move? What's happening?
Yeah. So a couple things. So first of all, we want all of our campuses to be together. We have 2 campuses right now. Our life skills program is on one campus, and then our other programs are here at the campus where I am. And so we want everybody to be together. We really want, again, the whole program as a whole to be integrated as well. The other thing is that Able, the building that we're currently in, did have a sheltered workshop. So obviously we don't need that anymore. And then the third thing is, with COVID, like everybody else, we found that we can do far more remotely. And actually, most of our jobs, obviously and I will say all of the jobs, actually, all of our job training programs and the jobs that we actually provide to folks that we help place them into, unless we hire them personally, they're all off-site. They're all remote, right? Because we're actually out in the community. So we don't need the space that we once did. The largest part of what we do is our community employment services crew, and they're hardly here, which is a good thing, because that means they're out working in the community. So we didn't need the space. We downsized to some extent, but because we are now consolidating both campuses into one, we're still in a good sized building. It's about 37,000 1,000 square feet. But we didn't need the space that we did. We learned that we can be more efficient by being out there. And now moving forward, we can all be together. We're still in the community. We only moved about 1.5 miles north. And it's been exciting. We're renovating a brand new building. So good times.
So the whole idea of being out in the community, of course, does a lot to educate people. Do you have some stories of just some great successes that you've had and how people who aren't normally associated with disabilities suddenly discovered that maybe things aren't as bad as they think?
Yeah, I think so. In terms of the community and just building awareness, it happens almost every day. I will say that we are very lucky. We recently hired a coordinator of public relations and fundraising. His name is James, and he and I are out in the community on a regular basis. And I will tell you that first and foremost, there's still a lot of stigma, not around our folks, but around ABLE and whether or not we are we one of those organizations that had a sheltered workshop. Just recently, actually, somebody said to both of us on the same day, two different individuals, "Oh, ABLE, you guys are the ones that lock people in the warehouses and they can work and make money all day." And I'm like, well, we're not locking anybody anywhere. We never did, but yes, there was that in the past. And so probably the biggest thing that I get to do, again, on a daily basis alongside James, is build awareness and tell stories about what's actually happening today. And then we get to take folks out in the community and introduce them to our people. And so I think practically a great example of that is we recently partnered with our local minor league baseball team, the Visalia Rawhides, and they have 6 interns, or they did during the season. The season ended a couple days ago, but they had 6 interns that were part of ABLE. And for the most part, it went phenomenally well. They are looking to bring them on for future events and then certainly hire them. And so that has been something really exciting to see is not just to partner with sort of our usuals. We really, really value those individuals that we've worked with, those partners that we've had for years. But to be able to go out to community and to be part of what Rawhides is doing, not just as interns, not just as staff, because again, Rawhides will hire our folks, but to also go out there, and we had a night that was just for ABLE. It was called Free to Be Me Night. We set up our booths and we give things away every single Friday night home game. And so that's a practical example of not only a business embracing our people and interning them, hiring them, but then also saying, we love what ABLE does. Let's bring you into the larger community and talk about what you're doing on a weekly basis. And there's 2 interns specifically that work there. There's 6 total, but 2 of them are really a delight. They're all awesome, so I want to be careful about that. But the brothers and sister, they are a lot of fun. And I tell you, you see them walk around the park and do their job, and it's just exciting. It's also fun. I'm at the booth often. We have an ABLE booth set up there. Kind of it's standard now, and it's great having them come by and talk to folks. And obviously our individuals, the people that have been through our program or are in our program, they're the best representatives of what we do. There are challenges, obviously, as to be expected, right? I think of the relationship we have with Best Buy, a huge distribution center here. We've worked with them for years, and there are times that there's things that we need to work on. We need to improve. We need to help folks understand what it means to work a second or third shift. But these are all practical skills that we get to teach. One individual, her name is Marley. She's been with our program for a very long time, and she's been at Best Buy, I believe, for over 10 years now. And she is somebody who takes her job extremely seriously, but is one of the most fun people you're ever going to meet. So there's certainly success stories, and there's certainly stories of challenge. The parks right now have been very difficult because Visalia really has a challenge right now with transient folks. And so what does it mean for us to clean our local parks when we also have an issue with, engaging with folks that may be homeless or what have you? And unfortunately, that's not always safe. So that's something that we've really had to embrace as ABLE and say, should we still be doing this? We've worked very closely with the city parks, with the city of Visalia to make sure that people are safe. And it is a balancing act because we want individuals to be out there in the real world. We want them to be seen. Our parks crews are probably easily the most recognizable because all of our trucks are branded and people see them out there every day. And so, again, we have really focused on just putting our people out there like everybody else, not of course in an exploitive way, but saying these are jobs that we can fulfill. And again, I'm very excited about the fact that we've been able to do that. I mean, honestly, our community employment services crew is really rising above and beyond. It's very exciting to see them build relationships, and not just with businesses, but local nonprofits. So we partner with Happy Trails, which is a organization here locally that does therapeutic riding, horseback riding. They've given so much to us over the years. We've given a lot to them. We essentially have the same clients. The Source LGBT Resource Center is another organization that we work very closely with. There's a lot of crossover with the people they serve and the people we serve. And so building awareness around our people and the partnerships has been really exciting. It's been very exciting to see Visalia or Tulare County as a whole really embrace us.
So what job does Marley do at Best Buy?
She does sorry about that. She does a number of different jobs, but right now she is basically, she drives a tug, I believe, and she's collecting cardboard and various items like that and recycling them. But they rotate. Sometimes they're stocking, sometimes they're driving the tug, sometimes they're cleaning. Sometimes I know in the past we've had people on the line as well. So Best Buy it's a distribution center. So they're actually it's an amazing place, actually. That's where you go and you see these huge TVs and iPads. It's this is like Santa's workshop for adults.
Yeah, boxes and boxes and boxes of all of that stuff too.
Yes.
And so that's a center that's a distribution center that then sends things to the local stores.
Yeah, they cover the entire West Coast. So they've been a great partner.
And so the folks that work at the Rawhides, what do they do?
So they basically help. They help with some maintenance. They help with facilities. They help with cleanup. They also help with sales and that sort of thing as well. They've been out on the field. They've helped to. They don't maintain the landscape or anything like that. That's a pretty specialized deal, as I'm sure you know. But they've certainly been out there helping with events, pre and post event type deals. So a lot of it is facilities. Yeah,
and do you think that they require, once they're on the job and trained, do you think they require a lot more supervision and a lot more work to maintain than the average worker?
No, not at all. Unless somebody, again, and we all have a bad day, but obviously if somebody, there's additional challenges, right? I mean, it's no secret if somebody has autism or something like that, and we certainly serve a number of clients that do, and they wouldn't mind me saying this. Sometimes there's some additional soft skills there that you need some additional help. The employer needs to understand that, it's okay, take a break, step back, and then get back to it. But no, they definitely don't need additional help, in my opinion. I mean, I will say, and again, I love Able. We have an amazing crew, but like any organization, there's drama and there's things you have to deal with on a daily basis. And I very strongly believe that it is consistent whether someone has a disability or not.
and that's the reason I asked the question, because the reality is, once training takes place, and training may be a little different for some people as opposed to others, whether it's disabilities. We've been trying to train politicians for years, and that doesn't seem to be working. So there's another a branch that you should start to recover politicians. But the reality is that training is different for different people, and the best training processes are the ones that can accommodate whatever anyone needs. But the fact is that once a skill is learned, once a job is learned, people can go do it. And so we need to get rid of this whole fear of what disabilities are viewed as being in the world by most people, as opposed to what they really are.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's so unfortunate that we have such a hard time making that happen. And I was going to ask you, but I think you kind of explained it. The differences between here and doing this in other countries, from an attitudinal standpoint, do you think that it's much different here overall? Or do we still really face the same fears? And are we making much more progress here than elsewhere?
That is a really good question.
Yeah.
I think there is less stigma, but it is almost more subtle here. You've already kind of said that, almost in a passive aggressive way, where it's, oh yeah, we love those people, but no, they can't do that, can they? Right. Whereas in the other places I've worked, it might be more direct. Somebody might actually not be passive aggressive. They may not be so subtle. However, and that is worse. I mean, I'm just going to be transparent. I have found that those stigmas, people will outright come and say, you can't work here because you have this disability. You won't find anybody here in the US say that, mostly for legal reasons. Although they certainly will let you know, and I'm talking locally, I'm sure this does happen, but I have never run into that here where someone will outright say you can't be here because of these reasons, but they will very subtly let you know, this is the reason that we can't accept folks. And so there's pros and cons to that. Sometimes it's easier dealing with folks that they're not going to be passive aggressive. They're not subtle. They'll just tell you what you think. And that means that you can have that open dialogue. You can have a conversation. You can educate them. And I do think that globally, what I have found is that folks are much more open to being educated. They're open to the conversations. Whereas here, you can have the conversation, and you know how this goes. Everybody kind of nods their heads, and you didn't get through.
Yeah,
you didn't get through, and the person acts nice. They act, they're passive aggressive, and we love those people. We love those people, but again, we can't help you right now. Whereas globally, I have found that again, the stigma may be worse. The things they say out of their mouth may be even worse. But there's sometimes more openness to back up, and when you challenge those individuals, they say, "Oh, geez, you're right, I was wrong." Whereas sometimes it's harder here to get people to admit they're wrong. There's a little bit more pride around that. So there's some things are easier for sure, and there are more resources here, but some things are more challenging because I think there's more pride. I don't know how else to say that. I think people are a little bit more. They don't want to admit that they hold the stereotype or that they have these ideas. Whereas sometimes it's easier to get folks to admit that they're wrong in other places.
And there's also the profit aspect of it where people say, well, it's just going to impact our profits. And we're so tied into that we miss so many things. And you said something earlier that I thought was absolutely relevant, which is that when a lot of persons with disabilities get hired in various places, the odds are we're going to be, we usually are, a lot more loyal, and we're going to stay there because we, even though it may not be articulated as such, we know how hard it was to get that job in the first place.
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely. I think there's also, I don't know if at least with the individuals we serve, the loyalty is not just about how hard it was to get the job. You're absolutely right about that. But there's also a real love for that place, for their community. I think from what I have seen, and again, I'm just speaking from personal experience now, I think sometimes folks that have disabilities, developmental disabilities in my case, maybe they value community more. Maybe they want to feel plugged in more than some of the other individuals we serve. I know it is very easy, especially in our culture, to have I'm a solo guy, right? You want to be independent, you want to do your own thing. And obviously sometimes that can be to the detriment of folks, of myself, of us. And so I do find that the folks we serve, really, they want to be plugged in more. They want that community, and that does play into how long they choose to stay at a place. If the job is going well, there's really no reason for them to leave. They're not interested in that.
That all gets back to the proper training, the proper fit and understanding. And some potential employees may not be able to articulate that or understand it. But, whether you have a disability or not, that could still be the case. And so we all can use assistance and help from others. And there's a lot of value in community. And I think we miss it way too often. Oh, I can do that. I don't need any help.
Yeah.
And and sometimes we don't need help. And the other side of that is that people need to recognize that they shouldn't just assume that we need help. Those people don't need help. It's always, or should be, okay to ask, but don't assume.
Yes. Yeah. Good point.
And we encounter that a lot. Well, what is the whole world of working in the nonprofit sector and so on done for you personally? It's obviously had to have a lot of personal effect on you and family and so on.
Yeah, it's taught me a lot. It's allowed me to learn so much about people that I love them far more than I think over the process of time. It really puts me in a space where I love people. I really care about people. And the more that I learn about people, whether it's the folks that I serve now or globally, whether it's, internationally, local, doesn't matter. People are people. That's the number one thing that I've learned is there's really not that much of a difference between somebody in Ethiopia versus here in California. There's not much of a difference between somebody that has a disability versus somebody that apparently doesn't. Although I will say I'm very transparent, to be honest with you, about some of my own struggles. Mental health is, like many of us, I feel that it certainly is a disability just as much as physical or developmental. And so we all have something to struggle with. I certainly have my struggles. I know that our clients do, our staff do, the people I've worked with around the world. Doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, we're all human. We all have our struggles. And I love what you often say about folks that, I'm going to butcher the language you use, but folks that can see and they're basically limited by sight, right? Correct me on how you word that. But I've listened to quite a number of your podcasts and presentations, and I love that because it is very true. We each have something to deal with. We each have pros and cons, and we're all human. There really is no difference on many levels. And so I guess what I've learned through the global work and through all the nonprofit work is that I get to see that every single day. There really should not be any such thing as stigma or we should all just admit we all have our own stigmas. We all have our own taboos, right? And so, yeah, it's given me a real love of people, want to continue to serve. It can be exhausting. I mean, it can be, as you know, mentally, you really do have to create space so that when needed, you have your personal time and then you're at work. And that can be tough when you're dealing with people. It can be tough with any job, but it can be, I do personally take all of this very seriously. I know that we're dealing with people's lives. And in many cases with the global work, I actually have been in settings where it was life or death. If you don't mind, I'm going to share a quick story about this and how it impacts my work today. So when I was in Ethiopia, I worked with a family preservation program. And there was a child there named Barakat who had pretty severe autism. And his mother, he was with a single mother, and she was really the only real relationship in his life. We worked hard to try to create other relationships and other spaces for him. But his mother tragically passed away. We did not know. She didn't let us know that she had HIV, and she passed away. And all of a sudden, we were left with a child who had pretty severe developmental disabilities and really did not have any other relationships. And although we were able to, in many cases, help families provide and support their children with disabilities, it was still a real challenge in Ethiopia to move a child with disabilities into a foster or adoptive home. That is a real challenge. And so we were tragically not able to find a home for Barakat, and he went into an orphanage. It was we hoped temporary, but he refused to eat. He did not have any other relationships in his life besides us. Obviously, he lost his mother completely unexpectedly, and he passed away within 30 days. And that was still to this day, still one of the toughest situations I've ever had, was to have somebody die essentially on my watch. We weren't able to provide him with the needs that he really had to have met. And so that continues to impact me when I think about the resources we have here, when I think about how important it is to build awareness and move past stigma, to move past these taboos, because in his case, it is very tragic, but he was not able to get the help because we weren't able to find somebody to care for him because those stigmas existed. And like I said, there's things that are better globally and there's things that are more challenging globally. And that was something that I have to say, if it would have been here in the US, we would have had the resources, I think, to certainly keep him alive and find him a temporary solution. And so when I'm here locally, or I'm not working in those life and death situations anymore, I have to constantly remind my staff sometimes that when we have a really tough day, it's not life and death. We are dealing with people's lives, that's true. But because we have resources and because we have a community that really supports us, I know that we would not have a barricade situation here in Visalia. Now, that may happen in other places in the US, but we do have a very supportive community. And so that is, again, obviously something that has had a huge impact. And that happened several times, several cases. It's very difficult finding help for folks. And so that really continues to give me a passion to advocate for folks. And also, I think it's so important that here locally, here in the US, we don't take for granted the resources that we have. We don't take for granted the progress that we have made, right? And although, like I said, there's things that are sometimes easier in other countries, there's also challenges. And here we have the ability, we have resources, and we can help. Fortunately, we live in a community, we live in a state at least that is supportive, and there's a long ways to go. But being reminded of that, to me, I feel very lucky that I am in a place that I know that would not happen again. Other things may happen. People may fall through the cracks, or maybe we can't find somebody a job. But I am grateful that we can at least temporarily keep them safe and provide for their life needs. And of course, COVID made that scary because, as I'm sure you know, we did lose people.
Yeah.
I was kind of put back into that place again. I got out of the global work for about 5 years and went, oh, wow, I'm here at Able, and we lost 5 people initially that did get COVID and passed away. And so it's always, it's just, there's a real sense of brevity, I guess. And life is so short, and it's a privilege to be able to help people in the little time that we have.
Do you sometimes have challenges dealing with the families of persons with disabilities in terms of getting them to let go and let people grow and expand a little bit?
Yeah, and this is true. I mean, certainly here locally in Tulare, but it's true globally as well. Yeah, it's I want to be careful how much I say about that, because our families and caregivers are really phenomenal human beings. But yes, it is probably one of our greatest challenges. And certainly I'm not going to talk specifics around that, but
no,
there is an idea, and some of this is generational. Some of it is just maybe how an individual grew up in the community. But again, I often hear folks refer to our clients as kids. Mm-hmm. Let's see what we can do for those kids. Many of them are older than me or have retired. They're in their 60s, 70s. And even if they're in their 20s, they're not kids, they're adults. And so that is an issue. And often the people that refer to them that way are their parents or caregivers. And there is, as you already know, and as you've alluded to, there is a challenge sometimes to help those individuals understand that if we're truly going to be integrated, we need people to be out in the community, and that actually the community is safe. Again, that's not something that people sometimes have the luxury of in other countries. It can go either way. And the story I just shared with Bearcat, it wasn't a safe community. In part, that's why actually his mom felt she couldn't reveal that she had HIV and get help in the first place. But here in Tulare County, we do live in a safe community, and helping folks understand that it is okay to be out there. And actually it's better for everybody, not just the person that has the disability, but maybe even more so for our community as a whole.
Well, there are a lot of challenges, and unfortunately, families oftentimes shelter their loved ones. I've seen it a lot with blind people, or and people who are losing their eyesight, and the rest of the family doesn't really want to deal with it. They just don't recognize that it isn't the end of the world. As I like to say, people talk about the road less traveled. All having any kind of a disability, and you're right. I've referred to people with eyesight as light dependent, which is really the whole issue, that you rely on light in order to function. But all of us travel down different lanes in the same road or on the same road. And there's nothing wrong with that. And we really do need to recognize that it's not the end of the world just because someone acquires a difference that they didn't have. We need to train them. We need to make sure they get the training and that the people around them get the appropriate training, a lot of times attitudinally, but we need to get that training in order to be able to allow people to grow and continue to thrive and be in the world.
Absolutely.
And it makes sense to do that. So it is a challenge, and it's something that we all have to deal with.
Yeah.
So I can't resist, of course. How did you come to discover Accessiby?
I came to so we were basically looking for with the rebrand, we redid our website, and I wanted to find something that would make it, of course, accessible, but not just accessible, but the most accessible possible. And so when I just started doing some searching, and Accessiby popped up, and that's how I personally found it. And then obviously through connecting from there. And it's been, I will tell you, it's been really awesome, because not only have our clients and our community benefited from just being able to go to our website, but also I've been able to share Accessiby within our coalitions, with our other nonprofit and business partners, and they've started to plug into that as well. And so I have to be honest, every time I show off Accessiby, people, they want to give Able credit. So I keep reminding them, like, no, this is a free service we've received. But it's so cool that folks, our community at least just feels like it's, mind blowing. And it kind of is. On one side, I feel like that's a little bit sad, because I think these resources should have been the norm much longer than that. But I'm happy, at least locally, to be able to kind of lead the charge on that. And again, it's been very, very good for us, and very fun to show off.
Well, the interesting thing about Accessiby and technologies in general, when people talk about, and I hear it, well, you have to use this sensor to tell light. I don't have to do that. Or you have to have these special tools to make websites accessible, and I don't. The problem is that the reality is, as we talked about a minute ago, yeah, you do have to use tools. You have to have the light bulb in order to get light at night, or we all have different tools that we use. We just don't think about it. And the biggest problem, I think, for us from a technological standpoint, us who happen to have so-called disabilities, let's say blind people, but others as well, is that although the technology got developed a lot quicker for people with eyesight, or for people who walk, or for people who don't have developmental disabilities, the reality is we're evolving the technology that allows us to have a lot of the same access that everyone else has. And if attitudes had been different, perhaps that technology would have been developed right alongside of the technologies that were developed for so-called persons without disabilities. But that's not the way it worked out. It doesn't make us less. It does in part create an indictment on the people who weren't inclusive right from the outset.
Absolutely.
And so that's something that we, of course, have to deal with.
Yeah, I agree. But so far, it's been very exciting for us, and it was perfect timing because of the new website and the rebrand. So it's been good. I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Well, and it's an exciting time from a standpoint of technology and everything else, because inroads are being made. I think the biggest challenges that anyone with a disability faces are still attitudes. The technologies are becoming more and more available, and other things are becoming more available, but it still boils down to ultimately attitude that has to be addressed in order to make sure that we all truly get the same opportunities.
Yeah, very much agree.
And you're making a big difference in that just by virtue of what you're doing, which is really pretty cool. And it's exciting to see the the various things that that Able is doing and that you're doing personally. What kinds of things are coming up for you and Able? What's the future going to hold?
Well, we are near end of year. So of course, for any nonprofit, we are really pushing for our typical, our giving campaigns, our donations. With the move, we're doing a VIP sort of invite only open house December 2nd. And then once we finish everything, then we'll do a big open house in the spring. So that the move really is a really big deal. So trying to get past that, it's both exciting and certainly daunting. But that's what's coming up in the next 6 months. In terms of our programs, we've actually worked with our local regional center to really reformat almost all of our programs at this point so that they are more person-centered, so that we can spend more time with our clients one-on-one. Getting the funding for around that has been a challenge. I mean, that's probably been the better part of 8 months trying to finalize what our new programs are going to look like. And we're very excited. I think with the passing of SB 639, which is the minimum wage law, we've very much embraced that. And as you've already asked, folks that are placed in employment, of course, get that. We're looking to move all of our training. So our training programs, which are temporary, are still almost like an internship. So we're looking to offer minimum wage in those programs as well. So there's a lot of changes that are coming. Certainly for any nonprofit. I mean, it's always a balancing act. My desire and our desire is to provide the best service possible, and then also looking at how you do that when you don't have a lot of money. Thankfully, the state recently passed some bills that have helped with that. But it's a challenge. I mean, it never really ends because there's so many people that need to be served, and there's only amount of limited resources. Again, we're lucky. We're lucky that we live in a state that has resources. I've certainly worked without them, but it's challenging. So, but it's exciting. There's so much change right now that I personally love change, and I accept chaos. I like it. And part of that is maybe all the global travel and all that. And that can be very challenging, obviously, for some staff. Some enjoy it. But being able to lean into that and say, change is exciting. Let's go there. I'm also kind of unlucky and lucky. And I gave Able credit because when I was hired, my background is in nonprofit world, in the nonprofit world as a whole. So I have a lot of experience in development and leadership, but working here domestically on behalf of individuals that have developmental disabilities is new for me. So there's advantages to that because I get to go into these places. I have a lot of coalition meetings and such where it's like, well, we can't do that. That's the way it's always been done this way. And I'm like, well, I don't know the difference. This seems much better to me. Let's do that. So I have that advantage where I'm not really stuck on a certain way of doing things, which in the midst of a time that has really been full of change, that's obviously a positive. On the flip side, I certainly have a lot to learn about program and policy because even though I'm good at dealing with people, the red tape side of things did not exist to the extent that it does here when I was working globally. So it's an exciting time for me personally. It's very exciting. I hope my staff can say the same because so much is changing, but most of them have been very good about embracing it. And I think we all recognize that good things are to come, but there's certainly some challenges ahead as well.
Yeah, but we can cope. We all have broad shoulders. You mentioned the regional centers. My wife was the chair of the board of the Orange County Regional Center for a while, so we're very familiar with that program and the whole case management process that they bring, and the fact that through them, a lot of funding is available. And you're right, California is a state that has so many resources and is willing to, for the most part, share them, which is really pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, I want to thank you for being here. You've been here for a whole hour, and it's been a lot of fun. And I've learned a lot, and always get inspired when I get to hear stories. Sometimes even when the sad ones are told, there's still stories that help teach us. And so I hope that everyone listening has enjoyed it. And we certainly appreciate you taking the time to be here because you've obviously got lots to do, but we really appreciate you coming and being a part of this today.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I love it. I'm always glad to do these sort of things. And if you don't mind, I'm going to tell you one more story. I love stories. And this is a light one. So
we love stories.
But so one of the reasons I love working here at Able, and I will say with the folks that we work with, is that when I literally the first week that I started, obviously folks were a little bit shy, right? I'm a new executive director, and I very much have an open door policy, and I kept trying to remind folks of that, but it took a good 6 months for them to take me seriously. But the very first week, a gentleman that works for us by the name of David, who had gone through our programs, and he's been here for a long time, he literally walks into my office when everybody else is being shy. And again, this is somebody that has been through our program, and certainly we've served and we've now hired. He walks in, he doesn't tell me his name, he doesn't ask me what my name is. I'm not even sure he knows who I am. And he just walks in, he says, "Hey, have you seen the new Godzilla movie?" And I was like, "Yes, I have." And I love it. But I love the fact that the reason I love working with this community is people, and I wish this was true for everyone, and I'm trying to live my life this way as well. But it doesn't matter who you are. A human being is a human being. A person is a person. He didn't care that I was the executive director. I don't know if he even knew, but he just wanted to talk to a fellow human being and ask if they had seen the new Godzilla movie. And
the more important part was you had.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And so he and I still talk about movies, and I was like, "Yes, I have," and it's awesome. But so we went on from there. But again, I love that story because David is one of those guys that just represents the best of what we do. He gets past all the usual junk that many people deal with in their lives. Is, "Hey, I'm too shy about this," or "This guy's the executive director or the boss," or
"He doesn't want to talk to me." Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
He just wants to talk to a fellow person and talk to them about Godzilla. So that's why I love what we do. It's really exciting to be a part of.
Well, thank you for sharing that, but thanks in general for being here. And I too love stories. I've been in sales most of my life, and I believe that the best salespeople are the ones who can really tell stories and share and teach and advise, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, again,
so
thank
so much
you.
Fun.
This has been wonderful. So I appreciate you.
I hope that you'll all reach out, and if people want to reach out and learn more about you and what you do, or talk to you and maybe seek advice, how do they do that?
Well, the easiest way is to go to our website, ableinc.org. Pretty easy. There's a contact page on there. We really make it easy to reach out. We've got information on every single page, so you're not going to miss us. I'm personally on there as well. So under the About section, anybody can reach us, but ableinc.org really is the easiest way.
Cool. Well, thanks again. And everyone, please feel free to check out ableinc.org. And I hope you enjoyed this. And I would really appreciate it if you'd let us know your thoughts. You can reach me at michaelhi@accessibe.com. That's MICHAELHI @ACCESSIBE.com. In one breath, I did that. Or go to our podcast page, michaelhingson.com/podcast. But we'd love to hear from you. Love your thoughts. Please give us a 5-star rating. We appreciate your ratings and your comments. If you know anyone else, and Keith, you as well, know anyone who might be a good guest or who you'd like to see appear on Unstoppable Mindset, please let us know and give us an introduction. We would value that greatly. I got a letter from someone this morning just about that very thing, and we really appreciate it when someone writes and says, "Been listening to your podcast. I suggest so-and-so," or whatever. So please do that. And Keith, once more, thanks very much for being here on Unstoppable Mindset, and we'd like to hear in the future how things are going.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.